Hello, hello. Kelsey Komorowski here, founder of Como. I am joined today by Nate. He is one of our absolutely incredible students, and we're really, really lucky that he has agreed to come on and share his story with us. His is really interesting. It involves two countries, two very different school systems, and I know that a lot of his journey and insights about what he has learned, his challenges along the way, will resonate with a lot of you. So we're going to dive right in. Nate, maybe you could tell us a bit about your late high school, or sorry, late middle school and into high school. What were you like as a student? What was your relationship like with school?
Okay. Well, first of all, I was doing a British system, like British curriculum in Cayman Islands, where I'm from. And actually, at my specific school, there isn't really much of a difference between middle school and high school. Like, after you leave primary school, it's essentially high school experience. However, the only real change is that I was doing officially like the IGCSE program. So, that transition was probably a lot smoother than most people, considering that it was kind of building on what I had already been doing in school, just at a bit of a higher level and a bit more pressing, a bit more volume. I'd say my school handled it really nicely though. So it turned me into a more not stressful student because I didn't really see the change in the environment as much as others might. But that's also to kind of to do with how I am as a student, just someone who really doesn't uh, overcomplicate or really uh, over what's the word? Give too much importance to things that, how do I say this? I'm gonna say this again. Uh, Someone who doesn't overcomplicate or overstress themselves with all the schoolwork. I feel like, and I know now with a lot of experience at this point that it's never one assignment is not going to kill your entire future. And especially if you're on top of all your assignments, an assignment is not going to kill you either. So I've always just been pushing through and not really making school my worst nightmare, I guess you can say.
Yeah, well said. So it's not for you, it's never been the end all be all. And I think Nate and I work together, you've often used the word chill to describe school and how you've
Yes.
been students. We've always been a bit chill. So that's really interesting. So kind of your transition into high school, it sounds like it wasn't a super significant transition at all. Would you say school at that point when you were in Cayman, was it easy for you? Was it a struggle for you? Like even if you were kind of, overall chill, and also your first words of wisdom, one assignment will not make or break your academic career, which is very true. But overall, was it difficult for you or was it relatively easy?
Um, well, my mom put me on IXL and handwriting and all those and books from a really young age. So I was already in the flow of doing lots of practice outside of school, like from the time primary school. Um, and so I feel like it really gave me an advantage in the sense that once I got to high school, say, all this having to do extra work with the workload increasing, it never felt like it was something I wasn't used to.
Mhm.
Um, I was, I wouldn't say I was coasting, but I would say it was never real stress. I didn't know real stress until I came to the IB. I'll just foreshadow that.
Okay, and we will
Um,
get there. Um,
yeah,
so maybe tell us a bit about the culminating, and I'm not a GCSE expert by any means, but the culminating in the system you were in was a set of exams at the end of grade 10 is the equivalent, I think.
yes, grade 10, year 11, yeah.
Yeah, and so how did those exams go for you? Was it kind of similar vein, more or less, not super hard? You prepared? Was it super challenging? Tell us about the exam experience.
Um, I'm gonna break off and give a bit more context even before I go there because I feel like I could have maybe prefaced some extra things. The GCSE system and I guess the British curriculum leading up to that makes you do everything. So I was taking, I think, 13 subjects. Um,
That's so many subjects.
yes, yes, and obviously more, or no, I was taking 13 in that transition into GCSE, and I think 11 once I reached GCSE. So In total, I had a lot of exams. I'll say that it was a month of exams. I think I had, do I remember this number? Either high 20s or low 30s total papers, um, which is like quite a lot. But I'd say that I never stressed about it either. Firstly, because the testing that I was doing before the finals was I was doing well. Like I studied for all my tests leading up to it, which meant that I knew that the knowledge was in there and I was just had to practice it in full. So for these exams, it was just mostly reviewing content was a small portion of it. The main factor for me that I'd say led to my success was the practice of the real path papers and just getting into the flow with these. And that really helped. And I also really liked having the variety because I'd say that I was definitely a generalist. I definitely liked doing everything and being an all-rounder, which is kind of why I decided to go to the IB rather than A levels.
Okay, so this is really interesting, and this is where the story I think takes an interesting turn. Because on the one hand, you've just shared that you had like 11 subjects and you had 20 to 30 papers. And I think for most people listening to this, it would be like, what? Like, that is so much. How is that not the most stressful thing ever? But that relative to what your experience has been now in the last 2 years, is starkly different, and that this was actually a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
lot of different types of stress. So before we move into the IB transition, can you tell us, and you don't have to go into specifics, but how did you do overall on your GCSEs?
Um, Straight A's and A stars. It was it was like it was very proud. I was very proud of it. I'd say the funniest part about it was that my highest science, I knew that I was taking, even if I had stayed for A levels on the paper I wrote for my subject package A levels, because you had to fill that out, I put biology. Because I knew I wasn't doing chemistry, but also I never like fathomed doing physics because the entire year I did not like physics. I barely understood what was happening half the time. And then physics was the subject I studied for the most and was my highest science. So
Isn't
yeah,
that funny how that happened?
yeah, I still took bio later, but it's fine.
Okay, so you completely crushed it on these exams. And then so right now, you guys, Nate is currently finishing his IB program in the Netherlands, which is very far away from Cayman Islands. Nate,
A little bit,
what
yeah.
made you decide to leave your home, go somewhere where you didn't know anybody to do this completely different and notoriously challenging curriculum?
Oh, okay, we're diving into a lot of factors that led to it, I'd say. But first of all, I wouldn't want to say I got complacent, but I was, I felt like I was being a bit too comfortable. I felt like if I had continued, one factor, this is one factor. One thing was that if I had stayed put, especially with the success I had had in GCSEs, I doubted whether or not I would even put in the necessary work for
Mhm.
year 12 and 13 because I would still be in the same GCSE mindset. Like, if this got me so good in GCSE, I'll just keep this formula and not adapt and evolve because I'm in the same exact environment, same setting. And it probably would have been really challenging, I'd say. That was a small factor, small factor. I'd say the main thing was a more personal reason that um, one, I wanted to experience a bit more of the world. I felt like, for those who don't know, Cayman Islands is a dot on the map sometimes. Most of the time, it's just not there. But we're just south of Cuba, um, and a bit to the west of Jamaica. So, oh, am I getting my geography right? Yes, I am. Okay. A bit to the west of Jamaica, and we are 250 square kilometers in total. And
Tiny.
for reference, yeah, for reference, I think ooh, I had a great reference. That's actually what I used in my EWC application. But let's just know it's very tiny. It's very tiny. Um, and so I basically knew everyone there. I knew everyone my age at least. I knew everyone my mother's age. I knew everyone my little brother's age. So, and then obviously I had family in the elder age. So basically the entire island. If you were local, I knew who you were. And if you were a tourist, you weren't going to stay long enough for me to need to get to know or like get to know you and I have a nice relationship. So it kind of felt like I was a bit stagnant, both in life and just my development. And I really, really, really wanted to kind of experience a bit more. And I knew it wouldn't be the best if I had stayed where I was. So that made me sign up for the UWC program. And through that, uh, unfortunately, was IB, but I did want to at that first stage. I wanted to do IB because A levels, you only get to take 4 subjects, whereas in IB you can take you can take 6. Um, yeah,
And okay, so two things. Remember, when you guys, UWC is United World College,
okay,
which is like a network of IB schools all over the world, if I'm not mistaken, Nate. Like, I think they're
yes,
everywhere. So, okay. So first and foremost, from what you've shared so far, you kind of decided, I want to challenge myself. I want to step outside of my comfort zone and grow and evolve, I think are the words you used, which is awesome. I know a lot
right,
of people do everything in their power to stay in their comfort zone. So the fact that you chose that at such a young age is really impressive. Um, so why UWC? Why not, you're so close to the States, for example, or Canada. Why come all the way over to Europe to this particular school and program?
right. So funny story, I actually start to forget it now that I just had to think a bit further, but I did not initially apply to UWC. My first application was to Canada, like you said. And I applied to just a regular boarding private school there,
Okay.
and I did get my acceptance. It was just a bit like pricey for considering it's only 2 years of high school.
Okay.
And that while I was actually touring that school is when I made my application to UWC because my aunt had gone to it, I think about 40 years ago now. She had been to the one in Wales, UWC
Oh.
Atlantic, and she said that she thinks it'd be a great opportunity for me, and I was like, me too. I think that this is exactly what I wanted actually, and I'm really thankful that I ended up being referred to it because I can't even fathom what my life would be like if I hadn't had all this opportunity.
Wow, your aunt for the win. That's awesome. I don't think I knew
Yeah.
that. That's really cool. Okay, so let's talk about the IB. Give us kind of a summary of your transition. What was so different about the IB than what you had done before? What were your first couple of months like?
Okay. The first couple of months were great on one hand and interesting on the other hand. Yeah. Um, Obviously, I had just come off of GCSE finals and doing great. The personal, non-academic aspect was really cool. It was awesome to basically, for those who don't know, I'm in a boarding school with the residentials and the day students. This school is actually it's one of the only 2 out of the 18 UWC schools which have day students, and we have day students from age like 4 all the way to my last 2 years of IB, which are the last two, or which are the last 2 years of high school. Yes. So residential is only the IB students. Um, and that was really nice. It was great to meet everyone. It was cool. I was starting to pick up new languages. It was really, really, really interesting. And it was very cool to see my sleep schedule also get even worse than before.
Hmm.
But that was one of the goals of this year, which it's been we've been working on it. Um,
Ongoing, ongoing.
it's ongoing for sure, yeah. But I'd say that academic wise is where the interesting side was because coming from GCSE, I thought I fully understood everything you could understand about math. But that was very different in IB. And so my subject package coming into IB was, or like my first term was higher level. Oh, let me preface this as well. You can do 6 courses and you have to take a seventh theory of knowledge, but that's separate.
Hmm.
6 courses, 3 of which are higher level, which means you'll do an extra class during the week and you'll have either extra papers or just extra coursework, and 3 standard levels, which is like the base level that um, you don't build up on top of. It's like taking the class without all the extras.
Yeah.
So my initial subject package was higher level biology, higher level Spanish B, which is like the middle ground between beginner level and fluent, um, and higher level math analysis and approaches. And the first two were interesting. I'd say biology was actually and still is like I'm quite comfortable with it because I think one thing the British curriculum does really well is its sciences. So I was really prepared for it already. Spanish, I realized that the gap between fluent and beginner, you're a lot closer to this level than I had expected. So I was going in there with more of the British curriculum language understanding, which is not the best, I'd say. So it was more of a subject than a language back in British curriculum. Whereas
That's a really
here,
interesting way to put it.
yeah, it's kind of like you're having to revise for it or just learn very specific things, which are crucial into fully understanding a language, but it was way less about actually integrating with and practicing the language.
Mhm.
So yes, it took a bit of adjustment to wrap my head around that aspect of it. And
Mhm.
then math, and then math, and then math. So I'll say that I did very poorly coming into IB. The grading scale is out of 7, and if I had an A star in math and a distinction in the higher level math back in my GCSE finals, uh, it was very shocking for me to get back-to-back 2 out of 7s for my first two math exams.
2 out of 7s.
2 out of 7, yeah,
Okay. So I want to pause here because so far from what you've described, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, because this is on the one hand, we're talking math, Spanish, the individual subjects, but if I'm understanding right, kind of zooming out, it's overall the content, like the level, the scope, the complexity of the content that you are expected to know and your mastery of using it and how you apply it in exams and in class was just at a completely different level than what you had been doing. Is that a fair assessment?
Um, in some cases, yes, for sure. I'd say the thing that gets you with the IB is the volume. It's to me, this is we're going way ahead here, but the IB is a really good university preparation in the sense that you're already on a university level workload, if not more, in some cases, which is a crazy thing to say as someone who's not in university, but as someone who lives with people who are now in university, they say that they're more prepared than they could have ever been, and they're coasting their first year. In some
Which
cases,
Yeah,
in some cases, in some
I feel like we
cases,
could unpack that alone, but I have a question for you that I
yes,
think some
for
people
sure.
might be wondering, and I see this a lot, Nate. Even I know it's different school systems, but in a lot of the American school system, Canadian school system, we see a very similar thing where,
Right.
students might be taking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 classes, and they feel like it's a lot. And I would just love to kind of clarify and like get your specific insight into the taking 11 classes for GCSEs and then you're only taking 6 now. So how do you make sense of that distinction?
So, okay, of course, back in GCSE, I was taking more classes, and I would have taken less if I had gone to A levels. But for some reason, it's the load of 6 classes, which was be the most surprising thing to me. Um, the issue is what you have to do on top of, like within each individual subject and your whole IB package, which makes it quite a lot. So I know, like obviously in different curriculums, you're gonna delve into the content on a much more focused scope and a much higher level, regardless wherever you are. You're obviously gonna have find the most struggle in your last 2 years because it's obviously a lot harder than you've done before. But the thing in with the IB is that not only are you doing that, but then you have coursework, mandatory coursework project essentially for each of your subjects, plus an extended essay on top of that, plus two different essays for your theory of knowledge extra course that they add on, plus a CAS portfolio, which is creativity, activity, and service extracurriculars, which are mandatory to your diploma, plus some extra things that they just throw in there. But that's all not, it doesn't sound very crazy until you realize you're doing all of this on top of all the tests that you would have done in any curriculum.
I don't know, Nate. To me, that sounds, as you were just saying it, I was like, no, that I personally at least get that. It's not, it's harder classes because it's grades 11 and 12, and that's when stuff gets harder. The
Yeah.
content itself is harder because this is a more rigorous program. And then the volume of work, which you had mentioned originally, but you just expanded on really nicely there, as far as the number of tests and assignments and assessments for each class. And then on top of that, the extra classes that you were required to take, the theory of knowledge, the extended essay, the SLI, this is it's like leadership, the CAS, that's another extracurricular. So overall, the expectations, both academically and then outside of the academics, that you must complete to a relatively high standard. Um, that totally captures, I think you just explained that so nicely. So, okay, let's like take us back to your first couple months when you come in and you're like, wow, this is so much harder. I just got two twos
Mhm.
out of seven on math, and like, oh my gosh, these classes, this is a different ballpark. What what did you do? How did you deal with that? How did you manage that?
Um, First of all, it was hard to manage because I didn't exactly know what specifically to do. It was I had tried like or thought of every avenue. It was like changing my mindset towards math or extra practice or reviewing content. Um, so I used a lot of your tips, which ended up helping me in the long run. Um, but those were things that I hadn't even really fathomed at the very beginning having to need to do,
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
it was something that I felt so comfortable with going in and was humbled with instantly. Um, but term two, which is coming out of winter break, my subject package looked like higher level biology, higher level economics, higher level. Oh, I didn't say my standard levels before. I'm so sorry.
That's
Higher
okay.
level biology, higher level economics, and higher level English, language and literature, and then standard level global politics, standard level Spanish B, and standard level math AA, analysis and approaches. So it wasn't exactly running from the rigorousness and difficulty of taking math at a higher level. It was just I wanted to have somewhat of a cushion
Mm.
to be able to make my transition and make that mental switch without having to suffer, both with it being my HL and with the content itself being more difficult. Because on top of all of this, I still wanted to have the personal development and experience of the extracurriculars and the social diversity of how many people are here and how many people you
Yeah.
can integrate with. So I didn't want to jeopardize the UWC aspect specifically for one class in the IB, which is why I decided to cushion with AASL and then build up from there.
And that decision seems, even from what you shared at the very beginning, seems to really align with your philosophy of like, it doesn't have to be make or break, and I'm not willing to kill myself. Like, even if, say, I could do well in this higher level math, it's super hard. But what would be required to do that is not worth what I would have to sacrifice, which is
Right.
a pretty special experience with all the other opportunities going on. Which I think is really important because I think a lot of teens, especially like in my experience, at least like the last 5 to 7 years, it seems to be this overkill and this belief that they have to do excel at everything, take the hardest everything, take all of the extracurriculars, and like at great personal cost, right? Like panic attacks,
Yeah.
overwhelm, anxiety. So I think it's really refreshing for you to be like, could have done it, decided not to for these reasons. And I want to, you mentioned two things that I want to come back to. I think they're really important. The first one is what you said about using things, strategies, tips, whatever you want to call it, that you hadn't thought you would need. And for
Yeah.
context, you guys, Nate and I met, I think it was August before you came into this program. And I remember, there's a lot, obviously, I don't remember exactly, but I remember that you were not worried. I remember your mom was like, this is going to be so hard. This is going to be such a transition. And you were like, chilling. Like, I feel like this is great. And which is normal though, because it's really hard to think outside of your own frame of reference. So even
Yeah.
though you're told, oh, it's going to be harder, it's going to be this rigorous, like your own lived experience up to that point had been like, well, look at how I did before, and you had all this evidence. So maybe you could just tell us like what were, I don't know, say two things or three things, like the most helpful things that you didn't think
Mm.
you would be needing to use, and then how did you end up using them and why?
So I don't want to portray myself as too aloof or laid back in terms of school, at least even before, because for sure I was never gonna do um, all the possible extra work I could have done in preparation or in homework and everything. Like I would do what I needed to do. And and I never really integrated the practices I have been now because I never needed to.
Yeah.
And some of those things which really helped me now almost get back to where I was before
Mhm.
is first of all, just a calendar. I can't even like stress this enough. Just having a calendar that you put things into is like it's a whole new world because one of my favorite things to do is to be spontaneous. And this was the thing that was making me most against the calendar because I remember in the early stages, you were really pressing on developing this calendar, making sure I was um, like relying on it or using it all the time just to get in the habit of using it. Now it's like, yes, okay, for sure, but that's not who I want to be. I want to be able to do things when I want to do things. And then it was only once I really did follow that advice, not follow that advice, but really become integrated with it, is that I realized I have all the time to do what I want to do because of this calendar. And I know exactly when I have the time to do it. So the calendar is the main thing, first of all. Within that, um, it was scoping, it was scoping out my tasks and plugging them into that calendar. So
Mm.
first of all, taking a look at everything I have to do, finding everything I have to do because it feels like it's all over the place. Um, Putting it in one place, and then breaking it down. Breaking it down, scoping and planning was most important thing within the calendar because it's nice to know everything is there, but it's even better to know how you're actually going to do what's in there and when you're going to do what's in there.
Mm.
Because, like I was going back to the spontaneity, I put things in and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do it at that time. I
Mm.
just know I have this much time to do it. This is how long it's going to take, but I know where my free time is around it. So, if
Mm.
anything, I can scooch and slide and move anywhere within that free time. I don't have to stick to it specifically at this time. Of course, it's wonderful. Sometimes I did get in the flow of doing things at the exact same time, but I still kept my spontaneity in the sense of being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it because I had planned what I needed to do, not what I wanted to do, but what I needed to do and worked around that.
That's huge, Nate. And I feel, I mean, like I had a couple questions I don't even need to ask now because you just said it so perfectly. And it's something I think so many students they really resist. But it's like when you know, when you get when you're clear on the stuff that you have to do, and it's like you said, it's not just what I have to do, but it's how I'm going to do it, when I'm going to do it, and that is taken care of in one way or another on your calendar, written out. It opens it up, guys. It's a tool for freedom, not this like imposing rigid structure and prison, right? Like it actually is
No,
quite liberating. So Nate, I'm so
yeah.
happy to hear you say that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Is there anything else outside of the calendar, outside of the scoping and planning that you felt made a difference for you?
Oh, for sure. There's so this is my first time. Also, when I came to IB, it was my first time working off of a laptop rather than just pen and paper and notebook everything.
Mhm.
So when you would go over some assignments, and obviously IB is very, might have gotten this idea by now, but the IB is very different to my old curriculum, the British GCSE, or I guess it's Cambridge, curriculum. And one really key aspect of that, even within the work you're doing, is how you do it. So there's projects, online work. There, most of it, actually, every single thing you do is online. It's on a document. It's on a like Word document. It's on an Excel document. It's making slides. In class, we're doing presentations. It's everything is on the screen, right?
Mhm.
And breaking down my tasks was something I wouldn't have done before. If anything, it was a little thing at the top of my page saying plan, a couple bullet points, and then a line underneath to get started with my work. But here I needed to make a document and I needed to have a structure. And what you helped me figure out was exactly how to answer any task I could have gotten.
Mhm.
Essentially, what we did was we made the outline. First of all, we did um, a higher level outline, and then we had a detailed outline building in within that. So essentially breaking down the tasks, putting the guidelines right there so I don't have to go search in my 20 different places to find what I need to do. They're all on my document already. And then within that, um, putting my introduction, my main body, my conclusion, going deeper into that. We're doing maybe the main points within that body. We're doing the hook in the introduction. We're doing the key points that I need to touch. And then going in further than that, it's actually just filling in everything I've already outlined with like the meats. Bone is already there. It's just putting the meat into and the filling, which is so much easier once you know exactly what you need to write. So that was super helpful, and I've done it for basically every task I've done here ever since.
That's that's so awesome. You just articulated that so well. And I wish I could like scream this from the rooftops. That like what Nate just said, you guys, is he has learned the logic of assignment completion. Like it's not
Mm,
like I obviously the content is different from, bio or history or English or geography or whatever, but how you manage information and how you actually work from like the guidelines and all the way through to the final product with those steps. Nate, you just said that so well, like the guideline deconstruction, the high level outline, and just moving through really systematically without the
yeah,
guesswork. Nate, would you say because obviously, on the one hand, a lot of the work, with learning strategies and skills, of course, we want to get better grades, and that's great, and that's one thing. But something I say, and we haven't actually talked about this in a while, so I'll be curious your thoughts. Did it save you time?
oh, wow, that's a whole nother factor. Yeah, of course. Um, yes, because first of all, it saves you time in the short term when you're actually filling in the assignment, but it also saves you time in the long term because you know exactly how to tackle any assignment. You're not having to. I'll go to the short term first actually before I even go there. Short term, it's saving you time because you don't need to think about how you're going to answer an individual task. You don't need to try and think, oh, how should I lay this one out? From my English essay to my biology report. How am I gonna lay it out? I know exactly what I'm doing from the get-go. I'm just doing the same structure that I implement on every assignment, and uh, I'm just changing and slightly what's the word? Conforming it to the subjects that I want specifically. So that's the short-term time saver. Essentially, I'm thinking time, don't need that anymore. Um, like extra brain power time, don't need that as much because it's just a system. I'm
Mhm.
going from system one of like logic and hard thinking to system two of like passive, just kind of going through the motions type of um, assignment work, which is it's for me personally, who loves to do everything all the time. I love having more time. So it was great. And then even in the long term, it's the same exact thing because you you know exactly what to do from before you've even started the task. You don't ever need to question how it's gonna look because you have a base framework which you're just adapting. I feel like this is the same, short term and long term. Maybe I should have started with the long term because I feel like I said my long term with the short term, but that was a really confusing set of words, but it's okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
It's just time saving because it stops you from having to put unnecessary thoughts into brainstorming. No, the brainstorming aspect is still there, of course, in terms of the meat, but it's like layouts and how you're going to tackle an assignment that you're freed of. Like your chains are broken. You're
Ah, I love
fully
that.
just you're fully just going through a machine, essentially.
I love that. I'm gonna bring that back to an analogy I've used forever. I realize like it's a tiny bit corny, but I just think it's so true. And to kind of just capture, I think what Nate just shared with this analogy, we always talk about like learning how to learn and building skills and learning strategies is the equivalent of like you don't, with all of your subjects, you're not climbing 7 Mount Everests. Every subject doesn't have to
Yeah,
be its own Mount Everest. When you learn how to learn, when you get a system in place, you can climb all mountains. And like ultimately, that's the name of the game because whatever you go for college, whatever you study, whatever life throws at you, you want to be able to fall back on, I can climb this. It's not about this only specific mountain. And now I feel like I was a little verbose with that, but yes, well said, Nate. Okay, I want to move into another thing you had mentioned a few minutes back, and you said this a few times, and I think it's really important. And I'll preface a little bit why. So often students feel like the struggle is purely academic. And there's a lot, they talk about it in terms of the subject is hard and the teacher is hard or the teacher grades hard or I don't have enough time. And like all of these things, you guys, they're all valid. Okay. And I don't want to negate that at all. But what Nate has said a couple times that I think is so important is about the mindset and the ways in which school, regardless of how hard your subjects are or how much you might struggle with procrastination or time management or focus, that so much of this is a mental game and it's not about a
yeah.
lot of the externalities. So, Nate, could you kind of tell us about your view on that, your experience with that?
Okay. Um, I'll start even from the back in my GCSE days, but you'd hear a lot in your circles, as students do, oh, this teacher sucks, or oh, this teacher gives like me a bad grade, but the other class that's doing the same subject gets way better grades. It's it's a very valid thing because obviously you were not going to talk about it if it's not a reasonable factor.
Yeah.
But coming to the IB, that was me as well, but that was me with every teacher. I was like, none of these teachers are teaching me anything. I'm doing everything self-taught at this point,
I love
and
the honesty.
they grade me as if like I'm AI and like I know every single thing I'm possibly supposed to do. And it was so at first I was also there and it was reasonable. It was very valid, but I was missing something very important, and that was the fact that that's not the most important thing because in any place, I feel like a lot of the time people get too fixed up on their potential in a perfect world, but nobody lives in that perfect world. So there's no point in trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone with the best teachers, with the best grading systems, with the best methods of teaching. That's not feasible. That's not reasonable to expect. So the best thing you can do is try and realize how you fit into your current system. So for me, yes, I did end up doing a lot of my subjects with more time spent myself without a teacher doing the research than with the teacher in class. I still to this day feel like most of my classes are pointless, but that's besides the point. Um,
Uh,
I the crucial part to me was figuring out how I can work around this and work with this. Because if my teachers aren't going to teach me in the way I want to be taught, then I'll figure out my own methods that I need to do and what I need to do to still get the success I want. And if
mm,
if I'm not going to use my teachers as my primary source of learning, then I'll use them as a supplementary source. I won't use them as my scapegoats. I'll still have them to help me, but it's just not in the way I was initially expecting.
My head almost exploded there. A few things that you just said. Holy moly. Yeah. So you touched on so many things. Like I'm already just excited to review this later so I can pull out all of these absolute wisdom bombs that you're dropping. But it's what you just surfaced is like students assume that if they go to class, they're taught to, and that's the end
Mhm.
of the story. Whereas
Right.
what you're saying is like, not only is that only the beginning, sometimes that's not even the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm like that's so it's really that taking ownership over that learning and advocating for it, not necessarily even in class, but through your own work and through what you do outside of class. And I think that's huge because so often it's like, and we're not going to, guys, but we could probably talk a whole other hour just about teachers. And, there's great teachers, there's not so great teachers, but at the end of the day, the teacher is not responsible for your learning. The teacher is responsible for delivering their curriculum to the best of their ability, quote unquote. Again, that's, there's a lot of stuff going on with that, but you are responsible for your learning. And Nate, it sounds like early on in your IB journey. I don't know exactly if that was like in the first term or the second term, maybe you can tell us, but that you took that responsibility quite seriously. You were like, if I want to do
Mhm.
how I want to do and I want to feel how I want to feel, I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to take ownership over this.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Um, I'd say, first of all, we're gonna go touch back on something really, really early on, but like you said, obviously people tell you that it's difficult, that it's a struggle going in. And like you said, I was in the framework of my GCSEs. I was like, okay, maybe it's difficult for you, but I'm built different. Like this will be fine. This will be
Doesn't
easy
apply to
light
me.
work.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, the rules don't apply to me. Um, but they definitely did. They definitely did. And I don't know anyone who doesn't see a challenge in the IB A level, just higher level education in general. But going past that, oh, I just hit my laptop really badly. Um, going past that, I don't remember what my train of thought was now. I slapped my laptop and I felt bad for it.
Oh,
Um,
no. You were saying, kind of going way back, you were like, yeah, it might be hard for other people, but they're not me, and the rules do not apply.
uh, okay. Right. And then I came here and the rules were applying way more than I thought they should. And it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. I think the luxury I had was that I'm living with people who have already done a full year of it
Mhm.
alongside the people who are in the same shoes as me. So I was getting both the aspect of um, we're in this struggle together from people who are in my exact same shoes at this point in time and the people who have done the struggle before. So they were, I definitely think, a catalyst in me understanding that this is not like anything I've done before. This is not going to be just free coasting. You're going to need to put the work in. You're going to need to actually take some of your time, learn things outside of the classroom. You're not going to get everything you need just in one lesson. And yeah, that was crucial. I think for people who aren't in a position like this where they're doing boarding school, which is not a fantasy world. I'm not going to say this, whoa, no, 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 no. I'd say it's even more challenges than benefits. But um, I'd say coming to the realization earlier, the earlier on you can, is the better because it's being, once you make that mental switch, you kind of leave the framework you were in before.
Mhm.
And the framework you can change your framework even in the same system. I think I've spoken to some of my friends who take A level still back home, and they're the top of my class, alongside me back in GCSE, is now barely cutting in some areas. So it's it's because of the mental aspect for so many people that they don't even get to realize. I think having someone else share their own experience when they were in your shoes is something really, really helpful because you get to hear someone and envision them being where you are now but seeing how they moved past it. So it's the mental side of realizing change is required because you're moving up and on in life, you know? It's not
Nate, how
going to be
did
the
you get
same.
so wise? How did you get so wise? Um, this is, it's funny what you just said, and we're kind of gonna take what you just said as our next and soon to be wrapping up because I know we don't have all day, but like kind of talking point. Because Nate, in a lot of ways, you coming on here, and one of the reasons I had asked Nate initially if he'd be willing to share his story was because he had said a few comments, and I was like, if only a couple students like that I work with that I know like if that they're in grade 9, grade 10, if they could hear this from somebody who's been through it, it does make a big difference. So in some ways, and there's going to be, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10,000 people possibly who have eyes on this story. And there's going to be students in there, there's going to be parents who are worried about them, who are watching this. And like by sharing this, Nate, you are kind of acting in that capacity, right? So on that note, I don't know if you want to call it like words of wisdom or what you would say to yourself before you realize. And you guys, I want to point this out too. What I think one of the reasons Nate's story is so valuable and so inspiring. It's not just about if you're considering going to an IB school or switching school systems. This is about leveling up into a much harder and like environment with school, which if you're going to go to college, even if you're getting straight A's right now in high school and you're coasting, it's going to be hard. Straight A's,
Yeah,
like it's a red flag. You guys, if you're getting straight A's and it's easy, you haven't learned how to
definitely.
learn and how to like navigate complex stuff. So
Definitely.
but again, most of you are probably in the same boat Nate was in, where it's like, nah, but like I'm just like really smart because like I get this stuff and I have all A's. Like, so Nate, I guess keeping in mind we have some students who that is the reality for them. They are the student that you were, right, coming into the IB. We also have students who have really struggled, right? They struggle
Yep.
like a lot with motivation. They struggle a lot maybe with math. Like they have those struggles. I think regardless, zooming out, what would your, one or two big pieces of advice be for based on everything that you've learned and everything that you've achieved? Because you guys, like, spoiler alert, Nate is pretty much crushing it as he's about to graduate and go off to college. So, words of wisdom, Nate.
It's funny you say that. I was actually just about to touch on that exact aspect of like the different types of students coming in, because I think, yeah, I was boat A student that you just noticed, but there's also the other boat of it was being challenged already from the get-go, which I think it can be more stressful in some cases, but also once you become, it'll be even more amazing. It'll be such an amazing feeling coming out of that when times are getting harder, because whether or not you're doing great and now beginning to struggle, or it's been rough already, that feeling of coming back up or reaching the top of the hill that was so far away at one point is incredible. And to get there, it's really simple. It's a lot simpler than people realize. First of all, it's the mindset. Uh, don't jeopardize don't jeopardize your personal care, because if you are not well, then how are you going to do well on the external things that come through you? Second of all, take the practices, take the learning to learn practices, such as the calendar, the scoping and planning, the outlining, these important things, which not only save you time, they just help you evolve in any type of learning. You can adapt them to whatever you want to do. And third of all, make sure to not kill yourself over this work. Make sure not to put yourself through all the stress in the world. That might be easier said than done for many. I know a lot of people here who still, even to this day, almost graduating, are still stressing over every test that comes up. And it's definitely a valid fear to have, because okay, one test might not be the end of the world, but 10 tests, now it's looking bleak. But just take it one step at a time. The reason you don't need to stress is because if you're putting that work in already, then you have the knowledge. And it's just feeling confident in yourself that you have done what you need to do, that you have prepared, and that you're ready to take on this challenge. It'll just alleviate any of the pressures you may feel and will help you do better in that exam. So that's my final words.
Those are awesome words of wisdom. Nate, thank you for sharing. Before we sign off for today, can you tell us just in brief what's next for you? So you've applied to college. What are you hoping to study? Where are you hoping to go?
So, okay. I did regular decision on all of my universities. I applied to mainly the US, but one school in Canada, University of Toronto. Um, yeah, I haven't heard back yet. I heard back should be next month. So praying for good feedback and good responses. But I'm gonna study economics. That's what I applied for in basically all of my courses, which is incredible to say because 2 years ago I did not even touch econ at all once. It was actually the IB, as amazing it is as it is, the IB that did not have business studies at my specific school, but had economics, and I was like, I'll give it a go. So now that's led me to something I love. Like I love economics as a whole, and now I want to do it in university. So yeah.
Well, Nate, I think I speak on behalf of obviously myself because I'm like your biggest fan, but also anyone watching this that we wish you all of the luck in the world. Thank you so much for taking the time to so eloquently share your insights and what you've learned and your journey. I know it will definitely resonate with so many students and the parents who are supporting them. So thank you, Nate. You guys, that's it for us today. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We will see you on the next interview. Bye.